Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by Charger Bolt Family, Brewery X, UFC Fit Temecula, and, of course, Manscaped. Use the promo code LAFB20 to get 20% off your next purchase. Go to manscaped.com for more details. Dan, as it has been for the last couple of days, the position breakdown, training camp battle, whatever you want to call it, continues with... I don't want to say arguably, but probably if you look at it on paper and you said to yourself, what would be the one position that you would probably expect to see the most competition for? I know we had a little bit with that with the running backs a couple of days ago, where it's just everything beyond Austin Eckler, those positions are up for grabs. But you go to the wide receiver position, man. The investment that's been put into this wide receiver group over the last 2 years. Two guys in particular kind of came out of nowhere, exceeded expectations for what they were expected to do last year. And, of course, two veterans that are on this team. All of a sudden, you have a logjam. You have a lot of guys. And, unfortunately, not all of these guys are going to be able to stay on the roster. So this will be an interesting breakdown to go through today.
Yeah, we've got two wide receivers that were drafted last year, one from this year. We got one guy from the XFL, one guy that, they're literally everywhere. I didn't even talk about any of the other four that just so happen to be on this roster, whether it's through smaller acquisitions or ones that maybe people forgot were on this roster. So, yeah, long story short, it's the Brady Bunch. We are going to get into all of these guys. And again, the premise of this show is we are going through the position of wide receiver, break down the depth chart, who we think will make the team, the impact each of them will make with this new coaching staff and new scheme. And we will go into where we see expectations for this group in 2021 under head coach Brandon Staley and new offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. So, Jake, wide receivers. That's all we're talking about today. Before we get into specific folks, let's kind of look at a bird's eye view of kind of what we saw from this team last year. The wide receiving core as a whole had just over 2,700 yards total. Is that number higher or lower than you thought?
No, that's. I guess if you would have
lower than I thought.
It's lower than I thought when you put into the expectations of what if you just isolated what Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are going to do, and then you figured that whoever was going to win the battle between, at the time that we thought early in the season, whether it was going to be Joe Reed or KJ Hill, you felt like they would be at least involved in the offense a hell of a lot more than they were in 2020. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And then here we have two guys in Jaylen Guyton and Tyron Johnson that show up that end up being two very serviceable deep threats for this team. The unfortunate part about it is that their production throughout the season was inconsistent. They didn't show up on a week-to-week basis. So they were good for, what was it, Tyron Johnson averaged, I think it was over 17 yards per reception and had like 4 catches, and every single one of them went for touchdowns or something like that. It just felt like any pass that went to Tyron Johnson, if the guy got 2 passes a game, at least one of them went for a touchdown. It was just some weird stat like that.
Yep. I can almost guarantee you that the wide receiving core this year will have more than 27-30 for the totals of the entire core. So as reference, 27-30 went to the wide receivers, and almost 900 actually went to running backs last year. Now, the reason I say that big change, very different offensive scheme. And remember what this coaching staff talked about. They want to put players in the position that they can best be able to succeed. Now, when you look at last year as a whole, Jake, some of the things that we saw shine through that were kind of not good there were players that were put in positions that weren't necessarily their strong suits. And we saw folks being pretty ineffective when it comes to like percentages. So for example, Mike Williams only caught half of the passes thrown to him. Like that's not, even though that's kind of the player he is, jump ball, he's better than that. He should not be just catching 50% of the completions. Now, is that because they're all chuck it? Probably, but that's not reasonable, nor should that be the case. Jaylen Guyton had a breakout year, 18.3 yards per reception, but only caught 50% of his targets and only had 28 receptions. Like when you're getting 55 targets, you need to catch more than half of those. Like that's just unacceptable. So catch percentages will go up this year. I will promise you, because we will be putting in more effective positions. The second one is going to be, where are they going to play? There are so many wide receivers, which we're going to talk about all of them individually here in a minute. We have to be more effective with where we utilize these receivers. I don't want to see Mike Williams just do 50-50 balls. He's better than that, and he has way more talent than just 50-50 balls. There's a bunch of guys here that we'll talk through. There's going to be a shift in scheme. We're going to see more wide receiving action, not just regular routes. You'll see them kind of running all over the field. There's going to be things that we have seen this wide receiving core do that the Chargers have not done in arguably decades. And that's what's kind of exciting for me, is so much is going to change. And this competition we're seeing, Jake, is a good thing. Like the best players are going to play. It's not just going to be this like who's
not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, it's just so long we have kind of just gone with the folks who have been on the team the longest, or have gone with the folks who maybe are in the coach's good graces. I don't see that happening with this coaching staff. If you don't play well and you don't execute, somebody else will.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But that's what makes this whole situation very intriguing, very unpredictable. It's just talking about it directly past Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. If we were talking about the four other guys that were on this roster last year, we expected a lot more from what we saw from KJ Hill and Joe Reed. They were supposed to be the guys that were going to take up the mantle of wide receiver 3, and both were extremely underutilized. One in particular, in KJ Hill, he had his fair drops throughout the year. Joe Reed was barely utilized on offense, other than the Jacksonville game, and then just poof,
one play
went away, was gone. And then you have the emergence of Jaylen Guyton and Tyron Johnson, both guys who have been on the team for a couple of years as undrafted free agents, and then again sparingly decide to show out and become serviceable deep threats. And now you just throw that in with what you drafted this year in Joshua Palmer in the third round. And it definitely makes things intriguing. It does. So, and again, we're not even talking about the other four receivers that are actually on this roster beyond the names that I just listed off. But it's not a bad problem to have when you have an offense that looks like it's going to be geared upon letting Justin Herbert take the reins of this offense, hopefully giving him better protection, giving it more time to let the plays develop, let these wide receivers make their routes, their cuts, their separations, and air it out. So, no, it's not a bad problem to have, but the truth is, Dan, as you mentioned, we really don't know what the hell it's going to look like for this offense, because this is no longer Anthony Lynn's team anymore. This is Brandon Staley's, and we don't know what that's going to look like.
Yep. So let's get into these players. There's no question the best wide receiver on this team, and arguably top 5 in the league, the Slayer himself, Mr. Keenan Allen, last year had almost 1,000 yards in just 13 games as a starter, tied his career high, 8 touchdowns, juked folks out of their shoes all year. Old reliable for Justin Herbert. I don't see any of that changing. And to be honest, I can see all of that improving this year. Anything you disagree there?
No, and it's so funny just because the list of accolades for Keenan Allen, they just speak for themselves. I mean, there's nothing really more that you can say. And what's interesting, Dan, is you mentioned it, as he got his bag of money. in 2020 and deserved every damn penny of it. I mean, the guy has averaged 100 receptions and over 1,000 yards receiving over the past 4 years. Oh, and by the way, made Pro Bowls in each one of those.
But he's injury plagued, Jake.
Yes. Okay. I mean,
I'm kidding. Hey, he's not injury plagued. He was. Folks, how quickly you forget that this guy has not missed a game in like 3 years. And then last year he missed a few. But the whole injury bug thing, like, it's a thing of the past. Relax.
Just don't even speak it into its existence, Dan. I don't want to hear that sentence ever again. But yes, in terms of just one of the top receivers, and still feel that he doesn't get the credit that he's due because he's more of a crafty route runner and is not going to make all of the explosive plays. But damn it, when you need someone to get open and when you need a catch for this team, that's Old Reliable. That's him. That's what he can provide this team. Speed is not everything. Speed is not the only way that you gain separation in this league. If you don't believe me, go back and look at the wide receivers that the Raiders used to draft in the first round and see how that worked out for him. Remember Darius Hayward-Bay? Remember that guy? I sure as hell do. But separation does not only happen by just speed. It happens by technique. It happens by route running, and Keenan Allen is one of the best in the business. I know that they had put up recently, what was that? I can't remember who did the poll that, what was it? Keenan Allen was number 9 in the list of receivers, which I thought, given the receivers that were in, is that right, Dan? Did I have that right? Was that where he was rated at?
I don't remember which poll you're referring to, but I'm going to trust you.
No, you know what? You know what it is? I probably confused his poll, Keenan Allen's wide receiver ranking with where Justin Herbert was, because Justin Herbert was ranked the 9th overall quarterback. So I apologize. So in that circumstance, then no, Keenan Allen still hasn't gotten the recognition that he deserves. But what else can you say about this guy that he hasn't already accomplished? The guy's just a stud.
He's a stud. There's no question about it. And honestly, the fact that we're not going to spend that much time on him says how good he is. There is going to be so much highlight reel material for this guy this year. Cannot wait to see him and Justin ball out. Moving on to the next one, Jake, Mike Williams, or some would like to call him Michael Thomas, apparently. We heard Joe Lombardi talk about him saying that he's going to be kind of like take that Michael Thomas role, which, to put that in perspective, which we'll talk about in a second, to put that in perspective, Michael Thomas was hurt last year. So let's go back to 2019. Michael Thomas, Jake, over 9 receptions a game, 1,700 yards, 150 receptions, and over 11 yards per reception. Now, do you think that there is a chance in hell Mike Williams is getting those numbers this year?
It's hard to tell. If you would have told me that, and I'm strictly saying this because of what we opened up the show with, it's completely unpredictable. If you would have told me that this is the same coaching staff that's returning in 2021, I'd probably say hell no. Hell no. That's not happening again. And that's just the way the offense was run. But we really don't know how this offense is going to be ran, how the ball's going to be distributed. Justin Herbert proved one thing last year is that he doesn't play favorites. He wasn't solely relying on Keenan Allen every single play. He wasn't staring him down. You could clearly see that when he's throwing to guys and giving the production to Jaylen Guyton and Tyron Johnson. So he doesn't play favorites. So it's really tough for me to expect that type of number from Mike Williams in 2021.
The main reason why, one, is the fact that Keenan Allen was not playing next to Michael Thomas back in New Orleans. Like, he was the volume receiver there. And could he get the volume of receptions in LA? Maybe. But even that, you're not going to take that much away from Keenan Allen. Furthermore, Mike Williams catches 56% of his passes. I want to say Mike Williams was catching like 80-something% of his targets. So, do I think Mike Williams' catch percentage is going to go up? Yes. Is it going to go from 56 to 80-something? Doubtful. Just being honest. He had 48 catches, 750 yards last year, Seems like he's always banged up, but always a baller, always a gamer. I'm very intrigued to see what route tree Mike Williams runs this year, because we know what it's been like in the past.
I still say that he stays at the X receiver position. And you were naming off a couple of stats there, Dan, and one more that's just more pertinent is in the entirety of his NFL career that he's been in since 2017, he has not surpassed 50 receptions in a single year,
which is
nuts. It hasn't happened yet. Has come close. He's been at 49, he's been 48, but he has not surpassed 50 receptions. Yes, best year was in 2019, 49 receptions, just over 1,000 yards.
Which is crazy.
That was averaging just over. Yeah, that was his best year. But with the weapons on this team, with Keenan Allen here, yes, with Mike Williams, you have to bring up can get injured when he's going for the 50-50 balls. So just anytime that you see that, you're just praying to God. It's just like, please get up, dude. Mm-hmm. Please get up, shake it off, go back, get back in the game. So no, it's a hard barometer for me to look at that for him to surpass. And again, it's not just because I don't think that he's definitely talented enough to do that, but there's too many footballs to distribute when you look at the potential of this offense, and let alone just the wide receivers.
I don't want to take away his deep threat abilities, because that is a differentiator for him, but I don't want that to be the only thing that he does. I would love to see him do more slants in routes in the middle of the field, underneath, like short yardage. He's in space. He's great at that. And I don't think we gave him enough targets there. And I think it'll also help his completion percentage go up.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I'm not saying that he's incapable of doing it. I just think when you start looking at the wide receivers and what they have, and again, we're talking about very different wide receivers. You have Keenan Allen, who's kind of your do-it-all everything. He's not your deep threat. Again, he's not going to beat someone 50 yards downfield with speed, but he's kind of your do-it-all Mr. Reliable, as we said. I think that there's another receiver in particular that can run a more full route tree better than Mike Williams can, that we'll talk about here in just a minute. And yeah, I just think the best spot for him in order to be productive for this team is at the X position.
There's no reason why a wide receiver should not be the second leading target, maybe the third, on this team. Last year, Keenan Allen 1, I believe it was Austin Eckler 2, Hunter Henry 3, Mike Williams 4. I understand the Eckler side, but for your number 2 receiver to only have 40-something receptions, I don't think that's going to happen this year. I could see Keenan Allen's maybe going down a little bit. I could see Mike Williams or whoever wide receiver 2 ends up being going up a bit, or if you combine kind of the two. 48 receptions for wide receiver 2 when you're a wide receiver of that caliber. Mike Williams is better than 48 receptions and 750 yards, period.
Okay, there's one intangible here. One that Mike Williams will probably keep on his mind throughout the entirety of this season. Mike Williams is in a contract year.
True.
So there should be motivation for him to put forth his best season that he's ever had. Up until this point, of course. And so that should definitely rev his engine. So, hey, if you want something from me to put out there in the universe that he could possibly surpass these numbers that he hasn't done yet, I'll take that as the reason for it. That he balls 100%. Out because he's in a contract year and he's motivated and he wants to get his money. That's why I could see him doing it.
Yep. All right, so before we get into wide receiver, quote-unquote, 3, you may have heard at the top, folks, we do have a new partner and sponsor for the show, UFC Fit in Temecula, which we'll get into some more specifics later because it's a fun story. But they have been gracious enough to partner with us and are a sponsor of the show. They actually are brand new to Temecula, Jake. And actually, I go there and they are fantastic. They got all kinds of goodies there. You can get all kinds of recovery options. They got massages, cryotherapy, you name it. awesome staff. And actually, we are going to have a giveaway coming up here soon, Jake. And we're going to be giving away 1 free year premium membership to UFC Fit Temecula to help celebrate their grand opening this month, the 31st of July. They're going to be having all kinds of classes, all kinds of giveaways, all kinds of vendors out there celebrating, balloons, you name it. If you're in the local area, anywhere Inland Empire, check out USC Fit in Temecula. They are awesome. Tell them Chargers Unleashed sent you. Jake, who is wide receiver 3 this year?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I have no idea.
You take back our thought press to next year and you mix it with this year. In reality, there's 5 guys. Sorry, 5 guys that could be. Sorry, it's over here. 5 guys that could be wide receiver 3, realistically. I'm going to give the edge to Joshua Palmer. I'm going to get, and this is why. Not just from a standpoint of, because he's the new guy or anything like that, or that he's the hot ticket. I'm simply saying, for where you drafted him in the 3rd round, this is this coaching staff's draft selection. Remember, KJ Hill and Joe Reed, they came from the old regime. And even though Brandon Staley still likes what the potential is for these guys to grow into, and you can throw in Jaylen Guyton and Tyron Johnson in there as well, I think because of the draft investment, this is this coaching staff's selection essentially for him. And more so, this could be the eventual Mike Williams replacement if Mike Williams does indeed walk after the 2021 season. I definitely think that they'll look to fast track Joshua Palmer's rookie season, hopefully with some good production.
I would put a nice 6-pack of some IPA on the line that Josh Palmer will probably get the most reps at wide receiver of any wide receiver during preseason. Want to take me up on it?
No. And I mean, because you and I sound like we're in the same boat here. But number 2, I learned my lesson from not taking the wager with you last year in regards to Keenan Allen's production. So your track record actually speaks pretty good, and I'm going to wait until the odds are more in my favor.
There we go. Okay. Yes, Josh Palmer, you said it more than I could. I think he is going to be a stud. You've already heard rave reviews from this coaching staff and from other players as well. I actually really like his route tree, and I think he's a little bit more crisp coming out of college than what Mike Williams was. Is he as good as Mike Williams? Let's not kid ourselves. We don't know, and arguably probably not. But he could be. He could be. Now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how are we gauging the barometer here? So if we're talking week 1, who's going to be the wide receiver 3? Or are we talking about when we finish the 2021 season, who's going to be the guy that we looked at and said they took the wide receiver 3 mantle and ran with it?
Yeah, I was more thinking like at the end of week 18.
Okay. Yeah.
Week 18, week 19. Like who's going to have the bulk of as a wide receiver 3, who's going to have the most, yards, receptions, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And you're saying Josh Palmer.
I'll say when this season concludes, I'll say it starts off slow, but I'll say when we're done with the 2021 season, Joshua Palmer made himself the wide receiver 3 of this team.
Okay. Now, interestingly enough, so Tyron Johnson actually had, I want to say, only 20 catches last year, but had almost 400 yards. Now, I'm not saying that he is wide receiver 3 by any means, and I actually think there's one guy that's going to have more than him, but Tyron Johnson led the team with almost 20 yards per reception. Basically had like Mike Williams' season a few years ago, just with less catches.
And tell the most important stat. Make sure you don't forget about the most important stat.
3 touchdowns.
No, the other one.
Drops?
Yes.
Yep. And that's a thing that is not going to fly with this new coaching staff. How many drops did he have? Do you know?
Tyron?
Yeah.
0. That's the most important stat. 0 drops.
You compare that to another guy that we're going to talk about in a second. I think he had just 50% of his targets turned into receptions. And some of those were very costly. So Tyron Johnson, I think, is going to be kind of your deep shot guy. He wasn't called many times, but boy, did he deliver when he was. How do you see his production this year?
I mean, I would hope that he continues to be productive. You know, going with the argument of what we were just saying about Joshua Palmer, I think that he ends up finishing as wide receiver 3. I'll go on the opposite side of the spectrum. I'll say Tyron Johnson starts the season off at wide receiver 3 because I think that he built up enough rapport with Justin Herbert throughout last year and getting that type of playing time and obviously seeing what he could do. Even if you want to call it a limited amount of production in terms of receptions goes, like you said, Dan, when he caught the ball, he made the most of it. 4 of his first 5 receptions in the NFL went for 50-plus yards.
Every highlight reel on SportsCenter for the Chargers was Tyron Johnson.
That's just ridiculous. It didn't matter if Tyron Johnson had 2 catches. One of them was for 50 yards, and it probably went for a touchdown. That's what it felt like on a weekly basis with him when he got started. So, yeah, I'm going to say that he's got the edge up over Jaylen Guyton, slightly, but
and that's not because of the volume that we saw last year. Because Jaylen Guyton actually had far more targets than Tyron Johnson did. But I think if you look at this coaching staff and kind of what they bring to the table and kind of look at the analytics behind it, I'm going with the guy that catches it a lot more. And someone that catches it 50% of the time, like, that's not good. Like, it worked, but there was a lot of issues we saw with Jaylen Guyton. And sure, was he better than all of us expected that he would be? Absolutely. Did he perform and bring us more production than we thought? Definitely. But is that the guy that you want to, are those stats someone that you want to be your wide receiver 3? Now, on this team, just to kind of put it in context, second in yards per reception, 18.3, which is crazy that Mike Williams isn't even in the top 3, I don't think. Just 50% of the passes thrown his way, he caught 28 receptions over the entire year. He had 8 more than Tyron Johnson, but had something like 15 more targets.
Yeah.
So he needs to work on securing the catch because they're not going to go his way as much if he doesn't.
No, and that's because Tyron Johnson and Jaylen Guyton essentially can be the same type of receiver. They're the ones that are linked with one another as far as their competition goes throughout this training camp process, and probably will be for the entirety of the season if both still remain on this roster. As opposed to if you look at guys like Joshua Palmer, who I forgot to even mention, just as far as he can play all over the field. Whether we're talking about the slot, he can play outside and he can be productive at both positions. Jaylen Guyton really just doesn't have – he can't do anything that Tyron Johnson can't do, in my opinion. So that's where these two really link up. It's even a more interesting case for the next 2 guys that we're going to talk about because –
Ooh, which 2?
Which 2? What are you talking about? Which 2?
Because there are a few. There's actually, this might surprise you, but there's actually one dark horse who I think has a chance to take over for, I think, the 2 that you're referring to. But go ahead.
So the two I'm referencing are the 2 wide receivers that we decided to draft last year. One being Joe Reed and the other being KJ Hill. Now, if you were to tell me, now we're in, what is this? This is now 6 wide receivers that we've talked about this far. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Tyron Johnson, Jaylen Guyton, and now, or no, how many was that? I lost count.
I think we're at 6.
6. Is it 6? Yes.
No, I'm sorry. It's 7. No, it's 7.
God.
You're right.
See, this is
KJ Hill, Joe Reed, Tyron Johnson, Jaylen Guyton, Josh Palmer, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. 7.
There it is. 7. Sorry.
We can count.
This is going to be interesting because then you have to start figuring out how many wide receivers are the Chargers going to keep on the active roster. And we know that there was a multitude of different reasons why Joe Reed was selected last year, not just for the fact that we figured that we could probably use him in more gadget type plays. And we thought we were going to see that a lot more. It turned out we only saw it once or twice, but we definitely thought we were going to get more out of him as a return specialist on special teams. And that never ended up coming to fruition either. KJ Hill, you go back to his career in Ohio State. Again, the dude put up massive numbers as a receiver at Ohio State.
Broke records.
But, there was a lot of people that were excited for KJ Hill as a 7th-round pick last year.
Myself included, thought it was a steal of the draft.
Me too. I wouldn't go that far, but I was excited. I was excited for him. And I expected a hell of a lot more production than we saw out of them. Now, Jaylen Guyton and Tyron Johnson shut me up pretty fast, and I didn't mind keeping my mouth shut about it because it was all for good reasons. They came in and took it over. So who stays and who goes out of these two? Because I think one of these two is an odd man out. And whether it's the Chargers keeping 6 receivers or however many, maybe there is some guy, Dan, that you alluded to that is beyond these 7 that could take one of these spots. Who knows? If it were me and I was a betting man, and yes, I'd hate to say this, but the odd man out to me would be KJ Hill. As much as I like KJ Hill, this goes back to that mentality. Your versatility is your biggest weapon here. And for me, this team, especially if Coach Staley and Joe Lombardi can utilize him more frequently in the right way, that I think you can expect to see a lot more involvement of Joe Reed in this offense than you could KJ Hill.
So this is where I think it gets interesting. And the end of your statement, I would agree. I do think that KJ Hill may end up being the odd man out, but I think we got there from a different path. I think it is a 3-horse race, and there are 2 spots left. And it's going to be Joe Reed, KJ Hill, and Austin Proehl fighting for those 2 spots.
Well, hang on a second. Time out. When the season starts, how many wide receivers do the Chargers have on their 53-man roster?
Oof. At most,
this will make it better. You think they're going to keep 7 wide receivers? Say that again.
No. Man, that's the part when you're going through the other episodes and other breakdowns of positions. Like, this is where it gets tough because there is going to be a guy or two, and Chris Harry talked about it on one of our previous episodes. One of these guys is going to get cut, and it's going to suck because he shouldn't. But we just have a lot of talent here. So it's probably going to be 6. And in which case,
better.
Tyron Johnson. Actually, no, it's probably going to be between Jaylen Guyton. Actually, no, I'm going to take it back. The 3 people that I mentioned, 1 is probably going to make the team. Between Joe Reed, KJ Hill, Austin Proehl. And in my opinion, KJ Hill and Austin Proehl are kind of trying to fit that one position of like the in the slot, just find a way to get open, nothing crazy fancy, but you're kind of just like reliable when called upon for that like 5-yard dig route, for like the little 3-yard stop. Like you think about like Tom Brady back in New England, like when you saw Julian Edelman just kind of have those super annoying like 5-yard outs constantly, 5-yard, 5-yard, 5-yard first down, 5-yard first down, 5-yard. Like that's kind of the role that I think those two are fighting for. And given what we've seen, and again, it's very small size for samples, but like we haven't seen KJ Hill do that much, nor have we seen Austin Proehl. But those are the 2 guys I think are going to take that role. Now, Joe Reed, I think he's going to make the team because I think he has differentiation that not many other people on this team can do. He's got the wide receiving stuff. He's got like kind of the end around gadgetry play. He got the special team stuff. Like he has versatility that I think this team is going to utilize. I just don't know if like that role that we just talked about, like, do you think that's valued? Do you think that is what this team is looking for? Because if not, those are the two guys that are out.
Okay, just for comparison's sake, last year, the Chargers kept 6 wide receivers. It was Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jaylen Guyton, Joe Reed, KJ Hill, and who was the 6th man? Jason Moore. Tyron Johnson wasn't even part of this group. There was another guy named Darius Jennings, who a lot of people in the preseason, after the preseason was done, were surprised that he was cut, given the production that he had actually put up, and he actually had versatility as a return specialist as well. So when I just list off those 6 guys, and we're talking about the 6 that are going to make this team this year. Number one, I think that there's already a hell of a lot more talent in this group, given what we know. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. But yeah, when I go through the list of last year, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, we already know what they can do. Jaylen Guyton, we really didn't know at that time. It was kind of an unknown. Joe Reed, we thought at the same time, as much as we're talking about now, was that gadget type player. KJ Hill was going to man mostly in the slot. And Jason Moore was going to be another possible deep threat option.
Big guy. But I think Josh Palmer kind of put that nail in that coffin.
Exactly. So Josh Palmer is a huge anomaly. And with the production that Tyron Johnson and Jaylen Guyton put up last year, they just made this competition that much harder. So I really think that probably, I know that I had said this earlier in regards to Josh Palmer taking over the Mike Williams mantle if he does end up leaving in next year in free agency. But he's kind of going to be a detriment to KJ Hill's playing time as well. And again, given the fact of versatility, Josh Palmer can play multiple positions at wide receiver. He can man the slot. He can man the outside, where the slot is kind of KJ Hill's, that's where he lives. That's where he made his college career, really. So any threat to any snaps that he may get at that position, again, it sucks to say it because I really liked the selection of KJ Hill last year. But
it's crazy how fast kind of this whole thing escalated.
If you told me, again, and this is another thing, the biggest anomaly really is the coaching staff. If this was still Anthony Lynn's team, I would probably say there would be a halfway decent chance that KJ Hill remains, given the fact that it was one of his guys he selected. And he has, he's shown favoritism toward the veteran guys, the older guys of this team. So I don't know. I hate to say it.
Tough.
I think he's going to be the odd man out.
The one thing I am excited for, though, is this is going to make for some fireworks during training camp. I cannot wait to see these wide receivers go at it because, they're all fighting for their lives on this team. So I guarantee we're going to see some emotions from some of these guys on the lower end, on the bottom side of the depth chart here. Before we get out of here, Jake, we mentioned the top, Charger Bolt Family is another sponsor of ours. Love them. Tell Ken we say hello. They have all of your memorabilia needs for these Chargers, all kinds of signings, all kinds of giveaways, raffles. They're doing all kinds of things for the community. They're actually having they're doing a signing this week, actually, for Joshua Kelly on Friday. And then I believe it's the 29th?
27th.
27th is
of
when
this month or next month?
Of next month is when they're actually having OG, friend of the show, Mr. Dan Fouts, is going to be doing a signing with them. So you can do all kinds of lids, all kinds of helmets, jerseys, you name it. If you want to check them out, go to Charger Bolt Family. They actually are on Twitter. They are on Instagram. They're also on Facebook. They have a great Facebook community. Check them out. Tell them Chargers Unleashed sent you. Ken will hook it up. He's a great, great guy. They have lots of things going on for the community. They're also doing like a backpack drive as well to help the folks in need. So if you have any backpacks that you're willing to give away, check out Charger Bolt Family. Help out the community. Otherwise,
buzzer, right?
Was it? Someone from like a 17-digit phone number was calling me. I have no idea what that even means. I'm sure it's
England. England calling you?
It doesn't even look like that.
Okay.
Anyways,
there's
that's
no
super
plus,
weird.
There's no plus in the front of the number? Okay.
No, I think my phone's going ballistic at this point. So, Jake, to your point, this is going to be a fascinating training camp for these wide receivers. And I can't believe that we're sitting here talking that KJ Hill potentially or Joe Reed potentially might not be on this team. Like that's nuts. But just it talks to the depth and the level of skill that we actually have accumulated here. And again, if you're looking at just the health of this team, that is a good thing.
In terms of depth goes, these are the type of problems you want to have at your skill position players. You want to be deep in talent, and the Chargers undoubtedly are deep at wide receiver right now.
Yep. So, Jake, we have made it through another position battle breakdown, this time wide receiver. We just finished the safety position. There's all kinds of stuff we've done in the past, other positions as well. This one, I think, has the potential to have the most fireworks of any of them that we go through. Maybe running back, but I think this one is more intense. Anything else you want to tell the good people before we head out of here?
Get me out of this football purgatory, man. Just get me to next Tuesday, for the love of God. I need it in my life. Bring back football.
We are so close. We are so close. Jake, what's your hat say?
It says Head Rush.
It's
an old school clothing company at the time, for a short period of time. It helped the UFC. So,
oh, wow, full circle. I like that. Look at that. All right, for Jake Hefner, you can find him at Jake T. Hefner. Myself, Chargers Homer on Twitter. You can get us on Twitter at LAC_Unleashed. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, you name it. We're there for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome. You've got tons of fun and exciting stuff. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors, Manscaped, Chargeable Family, Brewery X, and of course the newest one, UFC Fit. Man, that spot and Smack, that's awesome. Guys, we will talk to you soon on the next Chargers Unleashed.